My name is Danielle Carter. I'm 37 years old, and the strange thing about ruining your own life is that it rarely feels like ruin when it begins. At first, it feels like relief, like oxygen, like someone cracked open a window in a room you didn't realize had gone stale. That's the lie, anyway. That's the lie I told myself for months, while everything I trusted quietly rotted underneath me. I found the group chat on a Tuesday, a random forgettable Tuesday in March, the kind of day that has no business changing your life forever. But that's how it happens, isn't it? The worst moments don't arrive with warning signs. They don't knock. They just walk in wearing normal clothes and burn your world down while you're still holding your coffee. I was sitting on Rachel's couch. Her house still smelled like vanilla candles and lemon cleaner, the same way it always had. I was using her iPad to pull up a recipe. Chicken parmesan. We had planned a quiet night in, just the two of us. Something easy, familiar, safe. Then the notification dropped down from the top of the screen. A group chat, no filter. My name was in the preview. And then, my son's name, and a laughing emoji. There's a moment, right before your life splits into before and after. A fraction of a second where your brain hasn't caught up yet, where everything still makes sense. I lived in that moment for exactly half a heartbeat. Then I tapped it. My son's name was Ethan. He was 6 years old when he died. Leukemia. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, to be exact. Because when you lose a child, the universe doesn't just take them. It gives you a vocabulary you never asked for, so you can explain your devastation in clinical detail for the rest of your life. He was diagnosed at 4. He fought for 2 years. He lost. I lost. Everyone who loved him lost. That was 3 years ago. He would have been 9 this October. Sometimes I still buy his favorite cereal, Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I don't even realize I'm doing it until I get home, and I see the box sitting on my kitchen counter. And then it hits me. Every time. Like a train I keep forgetting exists. I need you to understand who Ethan was. Because what I read in that chat, what she said, it wasn't gossip. It wasn't harmless venting. It was about him, my son, my dead son, Rachel, my best friend. 14 years. 14 years of birthdays, holidays, late-night phone calls, shared secrets, inside jokes that felt like their own language. She was the woman who stood next to me at Ethan's funeral, who held my hand so tightly I thought her fingers might break, who whispered, "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." I met Rachel when I was 22. I had just moved to Charlotte with my husband, Marcus. No friends, no family nearby, just hope and a marriage that still felt new. We met at a prenatal yoga class. She was pregnant with her daughter, Lily. I was pregnant with Ethan. We bonded over swollen ankles and how ridiculous downward dog felt when you were basically carrying a bowling ball strapped to your stomach. We laughed too loud. The instructor asked us to respect the space. We went to Panera after. 3 hours of talking. By the end of that lunch, I felt like I'd known her my whole life. That's how it started. 2 women, pregnant at the same time, building something that felt permanent. And for 14 years, it was. She was there when Ethan was born. She cried when she saw him. "Danielle," she said, her voice shaking, "he's perfect." And she meant it. I know she meant it. Because you can feel the difference between real love and performance. And back then, it was real. Our kids grew up together. Ethan and Lily. They were inseparable. Blanket forts, road trips, sticky fingers from goldfish crackers. Falling asleep in this back seat while Rachel and I talked about everything and nothing. We built our lives side by side. School pickups, birthday parties, emergency calls at 2 a.m. She had a key to my house. I had one to hers. We didn't knock anymore. We just walked in. When Ethan was diagnosed, Rachel was the third person I called. After Marcus, after my mom, before my own sister. I couldn't even speak. I made these broken animal sounds into the phone. And she didn't tell me to calm down. She didn't say everything would be okay. She said, "I'm coming, don't move." And she came. She found me in a parking garage, sitting on the ground because my legs had stopped working. And she sat next to me, on the dirty concrete, in her work clothes. And she held me while I fell apart. For 2 years, she was there. Every chemo appointment, every hospital night, every moment I thought I couldn't survive. She organized meals. She read to Ethan. Green eggs and ham, 14 times in a row because he loved it. And she never complained. Not once. When he died, she didn't leave. She stayed. She slept on my couch. She brushed my hair when I couldn't lift my arms. She cleaned my kitchen. She picked up Ethan's toys while crying quietly so I wouldn't hear. That's who she was to me. That's who I thought she was. So when I opened that group chat, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. 8 women. Rachel, Jessica, Brittany, Kayla, Amber, Morgan, Tasha, Lauren. Women I knew. Women who had hugged me, who had sent me messages on Ethan's birthday, who had looked me in the eyes and said they were thinking of me. The messages went back over a year, I didn't read all of them. I couldn't. But I read enough. Danielle brought up Ethan again at brunch, like it's been 2 years. We get it, he died. I cannot do another grief post. It's giving grief is her entire personality. Laughing emojis, skull emojis, endless casual cruelty. Then Rachel. My God, sometimes I just wish she'd move on already. I've been holding her hand for 3 years. I'm tired. Tired. She was tired. Of me. Of my grief. Of my son. My hands were shaking. My vision blurred. But I kept scrolling. Because once you start, you can't stop. Not when it's your child. She had shared private things. Things I told her in confidence. Moments from Ethan's final days. My worst nights. My breaking points. Not as concern. As entertainment. I was still holding the iPad when Rachel walked back into the room. 2 glasses of wine in her hands. Smiling. Hey, I found that Merlot you... She stopped. She saw my face. She saw the screen. And in that instant, she knew. Her expression shifted. Confusion. Recognition. Panic. And then, something else. Something almost like relief. Like the secret had finally become too heavy to carry. I spoke before she could. My voice didn't shake. You made fun of my dead son. She started talking fast. Danielle, wait, it's not what it looks like. I was just venting. People vent. You made fun of my dead son. I didn't make fun of him. I was overwhelmed. You don't understand how hard it is to be the person who... How hard it is for you. Silence. Heavy. Ugly. Final. She realized it then. What she had just said. Who she had become in that moment. I set the iPad down. Stood up. Walked to the door. She followed me. Crying now. Real tears. Or maybe just another performance. I don't know anymore. Please, she said. 14 years. You can't just walk away. I turned. Looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't recognize her. I didn't just lose a friend today, I said quietly. I lost the last safe place I had. Then I walked out. I don't remember the drive home. I remember sitting in my car in the driveway. Engine running. Hands frozen on the wheel. One thought looping over and over. She laughed at him. I went inside, locked the door, sat on Ethan's bed, held his pillow, and cried until I couldn't breathe. That day, I didn't just lose my best friend. I lost the only person I thought would carry his memory with me forever. And I realized something I wish I never had to understand. Love doesn't always disappear. Sometimes, it just changes shape into something unrecognizable, something cruel, something that smiles to your face and laughs behind your back. It's been 7 months since I sat on Rachel's couch and watched 14 years of friendship rot in front of me. 7 months since I learned that 8 women I trusted had turned my son's death into a running joke. People keep asking if I'm doing better. I always say yes. Because yes is faster than the truth. And the truth is, I'm not doing better. I'm doing different. There's a difference. Better suggests healing is a straight line, that pain gradually shrinks into something manageable and neat. Different is messier than that. Different is learning how to stand inside a life that still looks like yours from the outside, but feels gutted when you step into it. Different is discovering that betrayal has an aftertaste, and it lingers. The first week after Rachel's couch was the worst, not just because of what I read, because of the math. 8 women in that group chat. 8 women who had seen those messages, read them, laughed at them, added their own. 8 women who had looked at me in public and performed kindness without flinching. That was the part I couldn't wrap my head around. Not the cruelty itself. The ease of it. The seamlessness. How they could move between versions of themselves so effortlessly. 1 minute. Thinking of you today, sweet friend. Ethan is always on my heart. The next, skull emojis and jokes about how I needed a new personality. That kind of double life takes practice. It takes repetition. It takes a conscience that knows how to stay asleep. Marcus wanted me to let it go for a few days before I confronted anyone. Not because he thought they deserved peace. Because he knew me. He knew that when I'm wounded deeply enough, I go cold before I go honest. And cold honesty can leave damage neither person knows how to come back from. But I couldn't wait. I needed to hear their voices. Needed to know if any of them sounded human when they were forced out from behind a screen. So over 3 days, I called them, one by one. Not for drama, not for revenge, for clarity. For the tiny shred of dignity that comes from looking betrayal in the face and making it speak out loud. Jessica answered on the second ring. The moment she heard my voice, she started crying. Not quiet crying either. Big, choking sobs. The kind designed to fill the room so there's no space left for anyone else's pain. Danielle, I'm so sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry. I got swept up in it. It was toxic. Rachel made everything toxic. I should have never... Toxic. She used that word again and again. as if naming the behavior turned her into a witness instead of a participant. I let her talk for almost 2 minutes. Then I said, "Did you mean it?" She went quiet. I could hear her breathing. "What?" "The message," I said. "When you wrote, 'We get it, he died, it's sad.' Did you mean it?" Silence. Then, very softly, I was frustrated. There it was. Not confusion. Not misunderstanding. Not being manipulated. Frustration. At my grief. At my son. At my inability to make my tragedy more convenient for everyone else. I hung up without saying goodbye. Brittany didn't answer. She texted me instead. A message so polished it looked professionally drafted. "I know what this is regarding, and I want to say clearly that I was wrong. I take accountability for my part and understand if you never want to speak to me again." No specifics. No mention of Ethan. No acknowledgement of what she had actually said. Just vague accountability in expensive language. The kind people use when they want credit for apologizing without enduring the humiliation of telling the truth. I stared at the text for a while, then deleted it. Not because it hurt too much, because it meant nothing. Kayla was worse. Kayla answered, sounding annoyed, like I'd interrupted something more important. Before I even finished telling her why I was calling, she exhaled sharply and said, "Danielle, I think you're reading this way too intensely." Too intensely. I almost laughed. "Too intensely?" I repeated. She sighed. It was dark humor. People joke when they're uncomfortable. Everyone processes things differently. It wasn't your grief to process. She paused, then said, in that brittle, superior tone people use when they've already decided they're the smartest person in the room, "You've been in a very fragile place for a long time, so maybe your perception is a little—" I hung up. Not dramatically, just decisively. Because once someone starts trying to edit your reality to protect themselves, there's nothing left to salvage. I haven't spoken to Kayla since. I won't. Some doors don't slam. They seal shut. Amber and Morgan sent apology texts within an hour of each other, nearly identical. Same cadence, same phrasing, same suspicious use of holding space. That told me everything I needed to know. They'd coordinated, probably in another group chat. Maybe they were sitting together when they sent them, passing a phone back and forth, trying to figure out how to sound remorseful without admitting too much. Maybe Rachel was in the room. Maybe not. At that point, it didn't matter. Their guilt was organized. Their shame was collaborative. Even their regret came in matching outfits. Lauren left me a voicemail. Mostly silence. A few shaky breaths. Then, "I don't even know what to say, Danielle." I believed her. Because what exactly do you say when you've spent a year helping turn a child's memory into social entertainment? There isn't a sentence for that. There isn't a script. Only the ugly, undeniable fact of who you were when nobody thought they'd get caught. Tasha was the only one who came to my house. I still think about that. Not because it redeemed her. It didn't. But because it was the only apology that had a body attached to it. She showed up on a Thursday afternoon. No makeup, red eyes, hands twisting together so tightly her knuckles were white. When I opened the door, she looked at me for a long second, like she wasn't sure she deserved to be seen. Then she said, "I read every message. I never stopped it. That makes me part of it." No excuses. No dramatic tears. No blaming Rachel. Just truth. Ugly and late, but truth. I appreciated that more than she'll ever know. And I still didn't let her in. Because honesty doesn't always earn access. Sometimes it only earns accuracy. That was 8 friendships. Gone in less than a week. People talk about social isolation like it's dramatic. Like it arrives with thunder. But it doesn't. It's quiet. Embarrassingly quiet. It's a Saturday morning when your phone doesn't buzz. It's reaching for a name to text before you remember there isn't one anymore. It's going to Target and seeing someone from the old circle in the candle aisle and turning your cart around so fast you nearly hit a display of Easter candy. It's neighborhood cookouts you hear about after they happen. It's the school fundraiser where you stand by the snack table pretending to be interested in raffle baskets because the women you used to laugh with now look through you like you're made of fog. It's a life being erased in tiny, polite increments. 100 little removals. None dramatic enough to explain to anyone. All devastating when stacked together. Marcus tried to help. My husband is a steady man. He has always loved me in a way that feels grounded. No big speeches. No performance. Just consistency. Coffee made before I come downstairs. A hand on the small of my back when a room feels too loud. The instinct to fix what hurts, even when what hurts is unfixable. He wanted to confront Rachel. He wanted to call the women himself. He wanted to do something with his anger because standing still inside injustice made him feel useless. One night, about 10 days after everything happened, he stood in the kitchen with both hands flat on the counter and said, "Just give me one reason not to drive over there." His voice was calm. That was how I knew how furious he really was. I looked at him and said, "Because there's nothing over there to save." He stared at me for a moment, Then his face changed, softened, not because he agreed, because he understood that this wasn't about punishment. It was about collapse. There's no revenge that rebuilds trust once it's decomposed. No confrontation dramatic enough to make cruelty feel smaller after the fact. There was just loss. Different shapes of it, different temperatures, but loss all the same. At night, Marcus would pull me against him in bed. I'd feel his heartbeat against my back. And sometimes, for one split second, I'd remember the way Ethan used to crawl between us on Sunday mornings. Little freezing feet, breath smelling like cereal and sleep, hair sticking up in impossible directions. And before the sweetness of that memory could land fully, another thought would rush in behind it. Rachel saying, "Are you ever going to move on?" The cruelty of that sentence wasn't only in the words. It was in the assumption beneath them. That grief has an expiration date. That a mother's love should know when it's overstayed its welcome. That the right amount of mourning is whatever amount makes everyone else comfortable. I started noticing how often the world rewards tidy pain. The kind that can be summarized in a sentence. The kind that dresses well, says thank you, and never ruins brunch. People are generous with grief for a while. They send flowers. They bring casseroles. They hold your hand at the funeral. But long grief? Loud grief? The kind that lingers and keeps showing up 3 years later, wearing your dead child's name around your neck? That makes people restless. Not all people. But enough. Enough to make you realize how much of compassion is conditional. The thing that haunted me most wasn't even the worst message. It was the duration. Over a year. That group chat existed for over a year, which meant Rachel had sat across from me dozens of times while secretly narrating my life somewhere else. Coffee dates, school meetings, girls' nights, casual lunches where she'd ask, "How are you really doing?" in that soft, concerned voice she used when she wanted me to feel safe. And later she'd go home and report back. Like I was a show. Like my grief was episodic entertainment. Episode 42. Danielle mentions Ethan at brunch. Episode 51. Danielle posts another birthday slideshow. Season finale. Still sad. That thought kept me awake more than the messages themselves. Because cruelty is one thing. Performance layered over cruelty is another. That requires planning. It requires emotional costume changes. It requires looking someone in the face and pretending not just to care, but to care deeply. I started replaying old conversations in my head, hunting for cracks, moments that should have told me who she was becoming. One afternoon in particular kept returning to me. About 8 months before I found the chat, Rachel and I had been out for drinks. I'd been quiet that night. It was close to Ethan's birthday, and those weeks always undo me a little. She looked at me over the rim of her wine glass and said, "You know, Danielle, you don't always have to be strong in front of me." At the time, I almost cried from gratitude. Now, when I remember it, I wonder if she went home and typed about that too. Danielle got weird and emotional again. Once you find the rot, it spreads backward. That's what betrayal does. It contaminates memory. Moments that once felt warm suddenly feel staged. You start doubting things that were probably real. And that may be the cruelest part. Not only does it ruin the present, it raids the past. I kept thinking about Ethan's funeral. Rachel in black flats because she knew we'd be standing a long time. The pressure of her hand in mine. The way she'd leaned close and whispered, "I've got you." I used to replay that moment when I needed comfort. Now I replay it like evidence, trying to figure out whether love and cruelty were already living in her then, or if one came later and slowly strangled the other. I don't know which answer is worse, that she was always capable of this, or that something in her changed while I wasn't looking. My therapist says the human mind hates contradiction, that it wants neat categories. Safe people, unsafe people, good friends, bad friends. But real life is more violent than that. Real life allows someone to hold you together in a parking garage while also resenting the pieces you became afterward. Real life allows a woman to love your child and still grow tired of the grief his death left behind. Both things can be true. That's what makes it unbearable. Not because it's impossible, because it isn't. Because it happens all the time. People can be deeply sincere in one season and shockingly cruel in the next. And there is no law that says the love they once gave you cancels out the harm they later do. 3 weeks after the fallout, Marcus found me sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. Just sitting there. No phone, no TV, no music. He turned on the light gently, like brightness itself might hurt me. Then he pulled out the chair across from mine and sat down. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I looked at him and said the ugliest truth I had. I think I was easier to love before Ethan died. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me. Really looked. Then he said, "You were easier for weaker people to understand." That broke something open in me, because he was right. Grief complicated me. It made me heavier to carry. Less convenient, less fun, less socially rewarding. But that doesn't make me harder to love. It only reveals who was loving me for real, and who was only loving the version of me that didn't ask too much of their empathy. I wish I could tell you that realization made me feel stronger. It didn't. It made me feel lonelier. Because once you see the difference between real love and performative tolerance, a lot of rooms stop feeling safe. A lot of smiles start looking rehearsed. And trust becomes something you approach like a wild animal, slowly, carefully, with your hands visible. By the end of that first month, my whole life had gone quiet. Not peaceful quiet, vacuum quiet, like something had been ripped out. Like all the furniture had been removed from a house and the walls were still standing, but every sound echoed wrong. I still had Marcus. I still had my mom. I still had my sister, who called every Sunday and never once told me to move on. But friendship, that easy, daily female intimacy I had built half my adult life around, was gone. Not thinned out. Gone. And I didn't know yet that this was only the middle of it. That worse than the isolation was what came after. The looking back. The photos. The memories. The unbearable task of deciding whether 14 years of love had been real, or whether I had simply been the last one to notice the joke was on me. A few weeks after everything fell apart, I did something I knew I shouldn't do. I went looking backward. It started small. I told myself I just wanted to organize my phone. Free up storage. Delete duplicates. Something practical. Controlled. But grief has a way of disguising itself as productivity. And before I realized what I was doing, I was deep in the past. Photos. Hundreds of them. Years stacked on top of each other in neat little squares. Rachel and me at the pumpkin patch, both of us laughing, our boots covered in mud. Ethan and Lily running ahead with pumpkins too big for their arms. Rachel and me at that terrible karaoke bar in uptown Charlotte, her singing off key like she didn't have a care in the world, me doubled over laughing so hard I could barely breathe. Ethan and Lily in matching Halloween costumes. He was a dinosaur. She was a princess. They held hands, walking up to every door, like the world was exactly as safe as we had promised them it would be. I stopped on one photo. Just one. It was taken at my kitchen table. Late afternoon light coming through the window. 2 wine glasses raised mid-toast. Rachel's head tilted slightly toward me, her smile wide, unguarded. Mine matching hers. We looked happy. Not posed. Not performative. Just happy. I stared at that picture for a long time. Long enough for the room around me to fade. Long enough for my brain to start doing what it had been trying to do since the moment I found that group chat. Find the lie. I zoomed in on her face, her eyes, the corners of her mouth, searching for something. A flicker, a crack, a version of her that hinted at the woman who would one day sit in a group chat and call my grief a personality flaw. But there was nothing. No hidden expression, no trace of cruelty, just joy, real uncomplicated joy. That's what broke me. Not the messages, not the betrayal. That. Because it meant the happiness was real. At least, at some point. You can't fake 14 years like that. You can't fake sitting on a parking garage floor with someone whose world just ended. You can't fake reading the same children's book 14 times to a dying boy and meaning it. Whatever Rachel felt for me, she felt it, which meant the cruelty didn't replace the love. It grew beside it, quietly, gradually, like something invasive. Something that doesn't announce itself until it's already wrapped around everything important. I don't know when it started. That's the part that still keeps me awake some nights. Was it after Ethan died? When my grief stopped being a shared crisis and became a permanent state? Was it during those months when every conversation circled back to hospitals and fear and exhaustion? Did something in her begin to harden then? Or was it later? When life kept moving for everyone else. Yeah, I mean that. And I didn't? There's no timestamp for betrayal. No clear moment where you can point and say, there, that's when she stopped loving me the way I loved her. I started deleting the photos that night. Not in a rage. Not in one dramatic, tear-filled purge. Slowly. Methodically. Like I was removing something embedded under my skin. Each picture. Each memory. Each version of us that no longer existed. Delete. Pause. Breathe. Delete. It felt like pulling teeth. Necessary. Painful. Leaving behind an empty space that throbbed long after the action itself was done. I didn't delete Ethan. I never could. His photos are still there. A separate world inside my phone, a world untouched by everything that came after. But Rachel had to go, or at least the illusion of her did. About 2 months after the fallout, there was a knock on my front door. I almost didn't answer it. I had gotten used to silence by then. Unexpected sounds felt intrusive, but something made me stand up. Something quiet but persistent. When I opened the door, it was Lily. She was 10 now. Taller. her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, helmet still strapped under her chin like she had ridden over in a hurry. For a second, I couldn't breathe, because she looked so much like Rachel, and nothing like her at the same time. "Hi," she said softly, her voice smaller than I remembered. Can I see Ethan's room?" The question hit me in a place I didn't know was still exposed. Not painful exactly, but fragile, like something that could shatter if I answered too quickly. "Of course," I said, my voice gentler than I expected. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked through the house slowly, like she was stepping into something sacred, or maybe something she didn't fully understand anymore. When we reached Ethan's room, she stopped in the doorway. Didn't go in right away, just stood there, looking. The dinosaur posters, the Lego shelf, the little desk with crayon marks pressed too hard into the wood. Everything exactly the way it had been. Because I couldn't change it. Because changing it felt like erasing him. "I still talk to him sometimes," Lily said quietly. I looked at her. She wasn't looking at me, just at the room. "At night," she added. "Is that weird?" My throat tightened. "No," I said softly. "I do too." She nodded. Like that made sense. Like that confirmed something she needed to know. Then she stepped inside, ran her fingers lightly along the edge of his desk, picked up one of his toy dinosaurs, held it carefully, like it mattered. "My mom doesn't talk about him anymore," she said after a moment. The words were simple, but they landed heavy. "I don't know why," she added. I didn't answer. Because what could I say? That her mother had grown tired of grief? That she had turned that grief into something small enough to laugh at? That she had chosen distance over discomfort? Instead, I said, "You can talk about him here anytime you want." Lily turned to me then, and for the first time since she arrived, she smiled. Not a big smile, not a loud one, just something quiet and real. She hugged me before she left, arms tight around my waist, face pressed into my sweater. "I miss when our houses felt like the same house," she whispered. So did I. After she left, I closed the door, leaned my back against it, and slid down to the floor, because that 10-year-old girl had more tenderness for my son's memory than 8 grown women combined. And the thought that Rachel might one day teach Lily to forget him, to move on the way she said I should, filled me with a kind of rage I didn't recognize. Not loud, not explosive, quiet, deep, permanent. 3 months after that, I saw Rachel again. It was at a school event, a fall festival. Bright colors, too many people. The kind of place where everything is loud enough to cover what's broken underneath. I wasn't there for Lily. I was there for my niece. But the second I stepped onto that field, I felt it. That pull, that awareness. And then I saw her, across the grass, standing behind some booth, laughing. She looked good. That's what struck me first. Her hair was done. New jacket. That same big laugh of hers carrying across the space like it always did. Drawing people in, filling the air. She didn't look like someone who had lost anything. For a second, I wondered if she saw me. If she felt it too. That invisible thread that used to exist between us. But if she did, she didn't show it. She kept laughing. Kept talking. Like I wasn't there. Like I had never been there. And I stood by a popcorn machine, watching her. This woman who knew what my son's hospital room smelled like. Who knew the sound I made when he died. Who had held pieces of me I could never take back. And she looked fine. That's when it hit me. Not like a wave. Not like something dramatic. Something quieter. More final. I was the only one carrying this. Rachel had moved on. The others had moved on. They had folded this into their lives. A mistake. A lesson. Something they might mention years from now in therapy or over wine. That friendship that got complicated. But for me, it would never be a chapter. Because they didn't just mock me. They mocked him. And Ethan is not something I will ever move past. He is not a phase. Not a story. Not something that fades with time. He is 6 years old. Forever. And every joke they made, every message they typed, every laugh they shared, landed on something that will never fully heal. I went home early that day. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Didn't stay for the raffle or the music or the fake normalcy of it all. I sat in my car again, just like that Tuesday. Hands still, heart heavy. But this time the thought was different. Not she laughed at him. This time it was, she forgot him. And somehow, that felt worse. I don't have friends anymore. Not in the way I used to. I have people. Marcus. My mom. My sister, who calls every Sunday without fail and never once tells me to move on. And I have my therapist who uses phrases like complex grief and relational trauma in a calm, measured voice that makes everything sound manageable, clinical, contained. But friendship? That easy, unspoken closeness I built my life around for 14 years? That's gone. And I don't know if I'll ever rebuild it. It's not that I don't meet people. I do. School events, grocery stores, casual conversations that hover politely on the surface. But there's a distance now. Not from them, from me. Trust isn't something that shattered all at once. It fractured, fine cracks running through everything. And now, even when someone smiles at me, even when they say the right things, there's a part of me that wonders, what version of me do they talk about when I'm not in the room? That question doesn't leave. It just settles, like background noise. So I keep things small, manageable, safe. Every Thursday I go to Ethan's grave. It doesn't matter what the weather is. Rain, cold, heat that sticks to your skin. I go. I bring cinnamon toast crunch. Just a small handful in a plastic bag. I place it beside his headstone. I know it doesn't make sense. I know he can't eat it. I know if anyone saw me, they might think it's strange. But grief isn't about logic. It's about survival. And rituals are how I survive him not being here. I sit on the grass. Sometimes I talk out loud. Sometimes I don't. I tell him things. Small things. The neighbor's dog had puppies. The weather's been unpredictable. Lily came by. I still say her name. I don't know if I should. But I do, because he knew her. Because once upon a time, she was part of his world. And I refuse to rewrite his life just because mine changed. Last week, when I got there were flowers on his grave. White tulips. Fresh. Placed carefully. I froze. Because I hadn't brought them. And I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I looked around, half expecting to see someone nearby. But the cemetery was quiet. Still, no card. No note. No name. Just the flowers. I walked closer slowly, like they might disappear if I moved too fast. Ethan loved tulips. I had told him once they looked like scoops of ice cream. He thought that was the funniest thing in the world. He laughed so hard he fell over. And now they were here, on his grave. Without explanation. I stood there for a long time, longer than usual, holding that moment in my hands, trying to decide what it meant. Maybe it was Rachel. The thought came quietly, uninvited. Maybe she still remembered. Maybe guilt had found her in some quiet moment and led her here. Maybe this was her way of saying something she didn't have the courage to say out loud. Or maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was someone else. A teacher. A neighbor. Someone from a small corner of Ethan's life I didn't even know about. I don't know. And that's the part that stays with me. Not knowing. I picked up the tulips. Held them gently. Turned them slightly in my hands. Gratitude. Fury. Love. Exhaustion. All of it sitting in my chest at once. Then I placed them back exactly where they had been. Because whoever left them remembered him. And in a world that keeps asking me to move on, that matters more than anything. That night, Marcus asked me something I've been avoiding. We were in bed, the lights off, the quiet that settles after a long day. "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" he asked. He didn't say Rachel's name. He didn't have to. I stared at the ceiling, thought about the group chat, the messages, the laughter, the years. "I don't know," I said finally. And it was the truth. Not because I'm holding on to anger. I'm not. Anger burns hot. What I feel is colder than that. Heavier. Forgiveness requires understanding. At least for me. It requires something inside me to settle into a shape that makes sense. And I don't understand. I don't understand how someone can hold you while you fall apart, and then mock the pieces later. I don't understand how someone can love your child, and then grow tired of the love you still have for him. I don't understand how compassion and cruelty can live in the same person. In the same voice. In the same hands that once promised not to let go. I don't understand any of it. And I'm starting to accept that I never will. Some nights, when the house is quiet and Marcus is asleep, I walk into Ethan's room. I sit on his bed, pick up his pillow, hold it close. It doesn't smell like him anymore. Just fabric softener. Time. But I hold it anyway. And I talk to him. "I'm sorry," I whisper. "I'm sorry the world is like this. I'm sorry the people who were supposed to love you got tired." My voice breaks sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. "I will never get tired," I tell him. That part is steady. Certain. I will say your name in every room I walk into. I will carry you loudly. I don't care who gets uncomfortable. Because that's the thing I've learned. The only thing that feels solid after everything else fell apart. Love doesn't have an expiration date. People do. Patience does. Tolerance does. But love, real love, doesn't shrink to make other people comfortable. Ethan was here. He mattered. He matters. And if remembering him costs me people, then those people were never strong enough to stand beside me in the first place.